Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to discuss films either current or classic. And this week is not a departure from our normal formula, our normal agenda, if you will. We're going to be talking about a current film, It Chapter 2. We reviewed the first film of this two-parter a couple years ago when it came out. Seems only fitting that we review the second part. And when I say we, that means there's more than just me. This show wouldn't be complete without these two fellas. Jim Pugliaffica was back in the air quotes studio with us. Jim, how are you doing, babe?
I'm doing great. I think I'm ready for this show anyway. I'm excited to talk about this movie and hope we get some cool comments in the chat. And I'm excited to have a special guest. So welcome to the show, everybody.
Indeed, and we'll get to that special guest here in just a moment. We call that foreshadowing, ladies and gentlemen. But first, let's go to Will Lindis, who's also here. Hey, Will, how's it going?
Hey, Brad. Hey, Jim. Hey, guest, who we'll announce in a second. No, I'm super excited for this one. There's been a lot of conversation happening about the movie we're going to be talking about today, and all over social media. Twitter's been going crazy with it. There's been a lot of blazing hot takes passing through my feed. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited for us to sit down and sort of unpack all of these.
A whole lot of unpacking to do indeed. But before we can get to that, let me finally go ahead and introduce this special guest we've been alluding to for the last 4.5 minutes. We are very glad to be joined by long-term friend and friend of the show, Sam White from Denver. Sam, you've been in the chat room forever, week after week after week. It's awesome to have you actually on the show with us. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. It's an honor to be invited. Big fan, so...
Aw. Well, we're big fans of you. We had an awesome weekend with you here in Tucson. Bummed you had to go back, but this is almost just as good as hanging out on the couch watching movies. Kind of.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Hey, we have another Denverite chiming in the comments.
Let me guess. I'm not even gonna. Oh, okay. That would have been my guess. So.
Oh, what? Yeah, it's Jordan from Denver. He says, "Hey, it's Sam here in Denver. Also, where is the video of his favorite podcast, by the way?" Thanks, Jordan.
Jordan, you can't see it because we don't have video right now, but I'm making a heart symbol with my hands to show our love for you. We're so glad that you enjoy this show so much. And you raise a good question. So if you haven't listened for the last few weeks, you probably haven't heard us give this little bit of a disclaimer, but YouTube, unfortunately, sunset the feature that we use to live broadcast video with multiple people at the same time. And unfortunately, it looks like the new version of that feature only limits you only to 2 people at a time, and well, we're more than a 2-person podcast. So we are currently exploring other options for video. For the time being, you'll get our logo as well as, our we hope, handsome faces. I got to point out, Sam, the picture that you sent in for us to use in the show artwork this week was you in your midsummer flowery headwear. Will, what did you think? Would that pass Ari Aster muster?
I think it would. So for Midsummer, of course, with the floral arrangements, the floral headdresses, and all of that, here at the local Alma draft houses, they were doing little garlands in the lobby that you could make and wear home or wear into the screening. And when I saw that picture, I thought, holy shit, you'd have been right at home in one of those screenings.
Well, I guess I found my Halloween costume, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This may be slightly racist, but I don't know.
Wait. Before you continue, Jim, do you want to continue?
I'm just going to say, I'm not sure you look Scandinavian enough to be in Midsummer.
Sam, all you got to do to fix that is just get a bear outfit, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
It's a great suggestion.
Oh, goodness. Well, I also want to give a quick shout out. We've got a few other folks with us in the live chat tonight. Kevin, Ryan. Hey, Kevin. Good to have you with us. Welcome. Glad to have you back with us on the show. Steve Sosa says, "What up, losers?" I don't know how I feel about that term, losers.
On this
Steve.
show, it's okay. On this show, it's okay.
I think it's a reference to the Losers Club, maybe from It. I'm guessing
It's gotta be. Otherwise, like Steve came in just to say like, oh, I'm gonna pop into chat just to dunk on you guys, which I know is not the case. We love Steve. Steve loves us. No, I feel honored to wear the Losers Club tag. I think that in the context of the movies, we're talking about the It movies. They wear it within the films as a badge of honor. So why won't we as well?
Does that mean we all have to have sex with Sam right here and now as a bonding activity as a group of friends?
I mean, is that our own little ritual of Chud? The ritual of Chub.
Ritual of Chub. Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. There we go. We've recontextualized it for the show. TM. It's ours.
Oh, goodness. I love it. Big Tom is with us as well. Big Tom, it's been a hot minute. Tom says it sucks not having video while we're doing the show. Tom, we definitely miss it too. We're working to get it back in some fashion if we can. And another person on the show wouldn't be complete without Bobby Miller's in the chat with us. Hey, Bobby. Good to see you, too. Welcome. Well, we have a big discussion tonight. A lot of movie to talk about. We've also got some plugs that we want to make sure we have some time for at the end. So, guys, how do we feel about jumping on into our conversation?
Let's pick it up 27 years later.
Let's do it, losers. I'm taking it. I'm taking it and running with it. Let's do it, losers.
Oh, all right. And Sam, sounds like you're all in. Is that what you?
That is what I said.
You guys can't see it, unfortunately, but Sam is wearing a white tank top, showing off a very hairy, beautiful chest. It's wonderful. We may have to take a screenshot. In any event, hey, real quick, if you are not familiar with the format of our show, hopefully you are by now, but if you're a new listener, A, welcome, B, let me explain. We're going to talk about It Chapter 2, spoiler-free, for probably 15 minutes or so, and then we'll give you fair warning before we go into the spoilery sewers of Derry, Maine, and unleash an alien being of spoileriness into the world. That's the best I got. I don't have much in the way of jokes tonight, guys. I'm sorry. I guess it's this movie. It sapped all the fun out of me. Maybe it'll come back.
Is that a you mentioned foreshadowing. Is that foreshadowing, Brad?
Maybe. We'll see. But don't worry, we'll give you fair warning before those spoilers come. So if you haven't seen it yet, you're curious about it, you want to know if we think it's worth checking out, hang on tight, because here we go. Our review of It, Chapter 2. All right, so we're going to go ahead and kick this conversation off. Ryan Rivera is in the live chat. Hey, Ryan, he says, I've actually seen the movie this time. Well, Ryan, be sure to share your thoughts with us as we go. Jim, if you don't mind kicking this conversation off, tell us a little bit about this film, what you thought, of course, spoiler-free, and is this worth checking out in theaters, waiting for rental, or even skipping it entirely?
Boy, yeah, I'm glad to start this thing off. So we have It Chapter 2 coming 2 years after It, the movie that came out in 2017, both directed by Andy Muschietti, and with pretty much the same cast. We'll get into that in a little bit. Of course, the first movie was mostly kids. Similar to how the original TV miniseries came out, almost 30 years ago now, back in 1990. The movie here is broken up into two parts. I'll just read the IMDb summary and then I'll get into my thoughts on the movie. 27 years after their first encounter with the terrifying Pennywise, the Losers Club have grown up and moved away until a devastating phone call brings them back. And by bringing them back, that means, of course, brings them back to Derry, Maine, where this fictional story takes place. I pointed out to Brad that I don't believe there is a place called Derry, Maine. I think it's a mishmash of two places. There's a Derry, New Hampshire, which is right next to Maine, and then, of course, the state of Maine. So I think Stephen King may have taken some liberties there. If anybody wants to do some research on that on the side, feel free to do that and let us know. But I believe it's kind of a mashup of two places. So this movie clocks in. The first thing I'm going to say, this movie clocks in at a whopping 2 hours and 49 minutes. And when the original 2-part movie came out back in 1990, both parts were 3 hours. And this movie, just the second part, this new second part is 10 hours shy of that 3 hours. So we've got either this movie's twice as good or it's just stuffed with twice as much junk. And we'll talk about whether that's the case or not. Ultimately, I think this movie is definitely not great. But I think it's good, and it's good enough as a sequel, I think, for this series. I had a lot of issues with it, but I think some people who are going in for scares and seeing how the story develops and, what happens with Pennywise and the kids and the adults, I think it's good enough, a good enough follow-up to the first part of the movie, which I was okay with the first part. It wasn't the best thing since sliced bread for me. I don't have a thing about clowns, so it doesn't really overly scare me like some people. I think the cast here is really good. Again, I think we're getting a lot more of the adult actors here. We'll talk about some of those, Jessica Chastain, James McAvoy, Bill Hader, Isaiah Mustafa, Andy Bean, Bill Skarsgård again is back as Pennywise, of course. I think they do a pretty good job in this movie. People talk about, especially about Bill Hader's performance in this, and we'll talk about that probably a little bit more. I think Bill Hader was fine in this movie. I really like Bill Hader. It was obvious to me, though, that they basically spoon-fed him all of the funny one-liners in this movie, and I believe that's the reason probably why his performance stood out. Now, he delivered those fine, but I think he kind of got preferential treatment as far as the script goes to stand out. That's just my personal belief. But, he was good. It was funny. They do try to amp up the scenes a little bit with some of the scares in this, and I thought that was fine. But at 2 hours and 49 minutes, it does feel overbloated. And it seems like, that a movie that long you'd think could really have time to pull this all together and maybe even at least give us like a decent ending to this. But unfortunately, and we'll talk about the ending and spoilers, I think the ending of this movie was one of its negative points a little bit. And I'll just say that more, meaning longer, is not better, but I think it's just okay enough. So this is a marginal okay for me.
A marginal okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, I think it's good enough. It's just not great. Didn't do a lot.
I can't believe it's not butter.
But not necessarily a bad movie.
All right. Okie doke. Well, that's 1 out of 4 opinions down so far. Let's round out the half and go to Sam. Sam, what did you think about it?
Well, I really enjoyed the first part. I thought the first movie was the best case scenario for a major movie event of it. I had high hopes that the second part would be as good as the first. I do not think it was nearly as good as the first. They set a lot of stuff up in the first film that just it was never paid off. I don't know if the film company got a little skittish about making a movie as dark as it needed to be, so they kind of veered it off towards a more goofy and funny sort of vibe. And I can't recommend it. The things I didn't like about it were bad enough that I can't do it. Although I really want to. It's not a recommend for me.
Oh goodness! All right, so that's a marginally okay from Jim and a cannot recommend from Sam. Will, where do you fall on the is it good or not spectrum?
Is
Well,
it or isn't it?
yeah. Hashtag it or hashtag not it. First of all, I do want to call out a comment that Jordan Riley says here in chat to answer your question, Jim. He says Derry is a fictional town and part of Stephen King's fictional made topography. And this is absolutely true. I remember this one's also the basis for Dreamcatcher is set in Derry. And there's even a spot in the 11 something 63, the time travel JFK assassination book, where the character actually runs into like some of the losers club when they're kids. Like it's
Oh wow!
Stephen King's stories are super, like they're all set in one shared universe, and he's been really leaning into that more recently. But I guess that's a good preface for saying, like, I enjoy Stephen King's works. I've read quite a few of them. I've read it. I have a special connection to the book, and I liked the first movie quite a bit. I think that they captured everything in that first film that they needed to for that half of the story. They had to change some things, but the things they changed were appropriate things to change, and the things that they needed to be faithful to, they were very faithful to. It was a fantastic adaptation, and I don't think that It Chapter 2 lives up to that promise. I am higher up on it than I think Sammy and Jim are, but I'm not going to like say that I'm like through the stratosphere on this. I think where it works best is when it tries to capture the nostalgia and the bonds between the characters. Like the feeling of going back to your hometown, when you're trying to like recapture like those memories and those things that you cherished so much in your youth, and how like these little weird small things became these momentous adventures. I think that was really, really cool. They captured that so well. They captured the connections between the characters, and all the plot beats that needed to be there were there. But there are long sections where the characters spin their wheels doing certain things that just add to they've had so much extra time onto this movie, and I don't think that they all worked. I was definitely kind of checking the clock there at the end of the movie. I really wanted it, and don't get me wrong, I'm not a stickler for long movies. I went and saw the extended cut of Midsummer, which was like 30 minutes longer, and I was like, yes, 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 give me more, because that was a well-used extra bit of time. This is the opposite, though. This is extra time for the sake of extra time. There's some stronger issues that come into play that we'll need to talk about in spoilers. We can't talk about them here, but we absolutely have to double back to. This is a fine enough movie. You'll want to watch it to complete the story. You'll want to watch it for the performances. I think all the actors did a great job with not great material, but I think everyone stepped up to the plate, especially Bill Hader. But man, give me the lightest recommendation possible.
So you're right there with me, Will.
So marginally okay, cannot recommend, lightest recommendation possible. It's not looking good, Pennywise.
You're gonna tip the scale. I know you are, Brad.
We'll see. But first, a couple comments from the live chat. Steve Sosa says, Ben was disappointed he didn't grow up to be a bearish guy. We see him in the trailer, so I don't feel like that's a spoiler. Ben is like a super Abby hunky guy in this movie rather than, furry. Chunky John Rittery. And we'll talk more about the Ben character. Jim, you had commented a response to that in the chat, and I absolutely want to have that conversation when we get to spoilers. Yeah. But Hamstracked, I love Hamstracked. He says, I binged all 10 hours of The Dark Crystal in one sitting. A 3-hour movie is nothing. Ham, that's amazing that you were able to watch all of the Dark Crystal in one sitting. I haven't even started yet. I want to. But I will say, to kick off my little bit here, I didn't realize going in this movie was going to be 3 hours. We had originally bought tickets for like a 10 p.m. show. And Sam and Jim and I are like sitting around in our living room and we're like, 10 p.m. Is that going to work? And Sam's like, well, it's a 3-hour movie, so I don't know. And I'm like, it's
home
3
at 2 a.m.
hours? What? And we had La Fiesta de los Osos, our bear run here in Tucson is this coming weekend. We had a planning meeting that next morning at like 9 o'clock. So it was like, no way in hell are we going to do a 10 p.m. 3-hour movie. Thank goodness we found tickets earlier in the night. But it was still a little bit of a struggle for me as the movie wore on. I'm just going to come out and say it. I think this movie is easily an hour too long. I think this movie contains a lot of stuff. I don't know if it was like filmed for the first movie or like they wanted to include it in the first movie, but they didn't have enough runtime, so they stuffed it here. But we get all of these like scenes that I feel like are a huge repetition of some of the stuff we got in the earlier movie, like scenes with them as kids. And I've been doing some reading. I guess they de-aged some of the kids for some of the scenes because they wanted to create some new stuff. And I was just kind of like, I don't know, like a little bit of that might have been fine, but like it bloated this movie to the point that it was just a chore to slog through all 3 hours. I was more interested in learning about the characters as they are now as adults rather than flashing back time and time and time and time again to when they were kids. But I do want to call out a couple of the performances here. I love Jessica Chastain. I thought she was great here. I don't think I've ever seen her chain smoke in anything else she's been in before. Usually smoking is like a big put off for me, but like it felt natural for her character. It made her character feel lived in. Not like a French smoking movie, Jim, but like an actual person, who might be going through this kind of thing. James McAvoy I thought was good here, but very minimally used compared to maybe how he could have been, which was disappointing. Maybe I'm just spoiled from, Split and some of his other more recent films where he has big meaty roles, but I didn't feel like there was enough here.
He basically disappeared in this movie.
Yeah. I was like, where's Bill? And then, another Bill Hader. I love Bill Hader. Bill Hader's great. I think we got just enough Bill Hader in this movie. I think if they had had any more Bill Hader, it would have been too much, and I would have become a hater in this movie.
Yeah,
so.
Any more Hader, and I think I would have puked.
I see what you did there, Jim. But I, in particular, want to call out Isaiah Mustafa, who played Mike in this film. I think he played Mike very, very well. Maybe too much like the original Mike in the miniseries. It almost felt like he was a carbon copy. But I really appreciated that. He was a really cool grounding force and presence. He kind of brings everybody back together in this film, and I kind of like some of the things they did with him. So we'll circle back and talk to a couple of those things maybe. But overall, this isn't a huge recommend for me. I wouldn't even say this is like a medium or a light recommend. It's, how people say like they're overwhelmed or they're underwhelmed? Well, Chapter 2 just left me feeling whelmed. So take that for what you will.
Brad, you're like sitting right on the fence and like a breeze could like knock you one way or the other.
It really could. Absolutely. Like, I enjoyed some things. There were some really cool sequences in this movie. There were also some really fucking boring sequences in this movie. So it just counteracts the balancing of the scales there. But I would say if you want a fun Friday night scary ? Movie. Sam, what is it you call this movie? The Ooga Booga film or something?
I said that was the main theme of the moral of the story was Ooga Booga, I guess. You should be scared.
Well, there you go. If you want some Friday night Ooga Booga, go check this movie out. Otherwise, I would say probably just wait for rental. If you haven't, seen the first film, you got to rent it anyway. Just watch them together. Jim.
But was there enough Ooga Booga in this movie to satisfy the masses who just want sometimes to get an Ooga Booga movie? Just see a movie with Pennywise doing his Ooga Booga thing,
I mean, it used to say. I mean, we're to say our opinions, but a thing happened in my screening that sort of blew my mind, because this only happens in festivals. At the end of the movie, like the theater erupted into applause. I was like, "Oh, that never happens." But it happened for me. So the people in my theater were absolutely connected and clicked in and loving it. And I think it's because the film is, as much as it is about like the CGI like monsters running at things and like the things that bump in the night, like there's a lot of heart in terms of like how the characters are interacting with each other, and they're interacting with their memories, and they're interacting with themselves as part of this unit of friends. And so I think that element is going to resonate with people. It didn't resonate as much with me, but hey, different strokes, different folks.
There wasn't applause in our theater, but the movie is obviously built for mass acceptance. I mean, it is an entertainment.
Yeah. And even at that, like I would have thought, I don't know, maybe we'll talk about the ending later, but I thought the ending really softened the movie's impact quite a bit. Like any impact that the movie had built, I thought the ending did, and or the lack of a strong ending, I guess. But we'll see.
There is and this isn't spoiler stuff, but it is a detail from the movie. There's like this sort of like recurring joke about how the author character can't like end his stories properly, and I feel like it's incredible. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and part of it's sort of like a dig on like a self-referential dig on King and the original It miniseries, which people would always say, "Oh, I loved it except for the ending." But I don't know that this one necessarily redeemed that legacy.
I wonder if the ending that they put on this movie was a meta joke about that. Like, oh, well, King can't end anything, so we won't end this movie. Like, we'll just make our own shitty ending, and that way it'll be the joke.
I wish it was that self-aware. I don't think that it was. And it's one of those things, like, when you lampshade something like that in your movie, like when you have a movie that like title that has like the word like sucks or awful or something like that in the title of the movie, unless you're great, it's gonna get like dragged up in like every headline and every review. And again, the fact that this movie ended so poorly, and they keep talking about how they end movies poorly within the movie, was just, I think, a terrible, terrible, terrible decision.
Potentially telling. Well, I think it may be time to make the jump to spoilers, because there's a lot to talk about, and we keep having to like pull ourselves back. I'm not really in the mood to edge right now. I just want to get there. Are we ready for spoilers?
Let's do it. I'm not an edger anyway. You know that.
Let's float.
All right. Then we're going to go ahead and make the transition to our spoiler section. I'm going to awkwardly ramble for just a couple of moments. That way, if you're listening live, but you're like cooking dinner and you're like out in the kitchen while we're playing in the living room and you need to run and pause or mute us, be sure to come on back for plugs at the end. That'll give you time to do that. Have you hit pause? Okay, I hope so. If you're listening through the magic of digital tape delay, feel free to use the time index in those handy-dandy show notes that Jim lovingly crafts for you. Skip on ahead to plugs. We won't be offended at all. But if you do see it, Chapter 2, and you want to come back for our spoiler review, please do. Here we go. Spoilers are officially fair game. Jim, I want to circle back to the Ben character real quick before we get into the gay controversy, which I'm sure is going to come up. You had responded to the comment about Ben, instead of him growing up to be like a burly Barry kind of guy, he has a story point to explain why he's Captain Abs. Did you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure that the movie made its whatever point it was trying to make about him. I mean, obviously he transformed himself, and I think if that's what the character wants, I think that ultimately I think may have been a good thing for the character. But the way it was handled in the movie was that, I mean, there were even some jokes about his size, right, by these adults. There was at least one that I saw, trying to be funny, behind his back, saying, "Oh yeah, he used to be the fat guy," and that just felt a little off to me. It felt a little bit out of place that adults would be telling that kind of joke to each other. Kids maybe, kids making fun of the fat kid. That stuff happens all the time. But for adults to be doing that in the movie felt very weird for me. And also there was other subtle fat shaming going on with other characters. One of the characters' mothers was large, and they kind of made a little fun of that. So that was the subtle fat shaming that was going on was bothersome to me. Just one of the things that was bothersome to me. And it seemed like, in the end, right? He connects with, what's the girl's name? I forget what her name is.
Beverly.
Beverly. And the movie made it seem like, now that they didn't come out and say this directly, but now that he's back, now that he's in shape, she can kind of notice him. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, and again, that just felt really weird to me.
I think
not
for
only
me,
that, but they get to end up as supermodels on a boat at the end.
It should be an MTV music video.
Which ending was that? Was that the second or third?
It was a montage
ending?
Towards one of the ends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah, it felt kind of cheap to me. Like, one of the things that I really appreciated about the original miniseries was the relationship between Ben and Bev, and the whole, like, January embers, like, I burn there too thing was so sweet and romantic. And for him to now be this, like, supermodel billionaire dude, I don't know, it kind of, like, lessened them ending up together a little for me, but...
And it probably didn't, I mean, and I can see that. I did not feel the same, but I think that was because going into this, that's exactly what happens in the book, and that's exactly what happened in the miniseries. Like, so I going into this, I wasn't expecting otherwise. I could get if, someone who's coming into this blind, and then suddenly it's just, like, kind of caught with the whiplash of, like, oh, what the fuck? Like, how that could be impactful. So, I don't know. I have less of a problem with that. I do think that, if we're kind of circling that particular area, I do think some of the digs at Eddie's wife felt cruel because we didn't have any other context for her. We I mean, I think we don't even get to see her in the movie. I could be wrong. We hear her, like, sort of like screeching at him over the car phone, that sort of thing. And the idea is that he sort of married the same type of woman that was his mother, and that's both the joke and the tragedy and the cyclical nature of his character, in that, he didn't quite escape this particular pattern and fell back into it. All of that is really cool and makes for an interesting story, but you have to show that sort of stuff. You have to sort of put your money where your mouth is if you're going to explore that type of theme. Instead, what this movie did, and it did this in a few other areas that I really want to come back to in a second, is it remembered the plot details from the source material, but it didn't understand the thematic importance of those plot details. So it would, like, plop those plot details in so that you can say, like, yeah, it's checking off the list, but it's not, like, capturing the feeling and the things that it's supposed to capture. So that rang extremely hollow, as did several of the other things that were just plucked out of the story, so that they can say, look, we're being faithful. The gay bashing stuff, which we'll get to in a second, is a big part of that too.
I mean, this seems like the natural point to just go ahead and throw it out there. So, Will, if you want to helm that.
Yeah, so very early on in this film, we are treated to a
like first scene, basically.
Yeah, right? Yeah, to a scene where some of the dairy locals run into, like, some, like, basically, like, four, like, towny type guys run into a gay couple that's in the dairy festival, and the canal
festival,
the canal days, and they beat the shit out of one of them and throw him into the canal. I mean, it is a gay bashing hate crime, like, playing out on screen. And then Pennywise steps in and finishes the job. And there's some controversy going on around this, and I think that it's warranted. I mean, this was in the source material, and I get why they put it in here. Because the story of Derry is, it's supposed to be sort of like a, it's again, it's very thematic. You know, there's all of this racism and homophobia and domestic abuse and misogyny and all of these terrible things that lurk under the surface, literally in the case of Pennywise, but also thematically in beneath this like idyllic small town, the type of town that we think like, oh man, remember the good old days. And so that's the terror of it when you read the book, or when you kind of think about what the story is that, yeah, it's this personified evil like coming out of the gutters and fucking you up, but it's also any town has this like terrible shit right underneath the veneer. Problem here is that they lifted that plot point right out of the story and put it in there so that we can have the gay bashing just like we had it in the story, but it never really captures that feeling of like, this could be any town. This is an evil lurking beneath the surface of that glossy memory of ours. It's just a gay bashing for gay bashing's sake. And I hated that so much. It's one of those things where if you're going to do this type of thing, and I think it's okay to use these types of things in stories, but if you are, you have to be extremely purposeful with that decision. And this movie was not purposeful with that decision, especially considering what they end up doing with the Bill Hader character later on. So yeah, there is a huge issue in how they executed the gay themes of this film.
Right, and that was my issue with it. Not the fact that there was basically not just a gay bashing, but they in all intents and purposes murdered that guy. Basically kicked the shit out of him. He was unconscious. They threw him in the river. He would have drowned, except Pennywise basically pulls him out and, I don't know, rips his heart out or something, right, and kills him. Now, we never see that act that was perpetrated by that gang as an act that was tied to some underlying evil. They never tied it to that, at least in my mind. They never showed any kind of foreshadowing, like they didn't even have like a red balloon like go up or something like that, like before it happened, at least that I saw. And that's what made it feel really random, unnecessary, and basically kind of took me out of the movie for a long time. At the beginning of the movie, I'm like, okay, something's going to and we never see the ramifications of that. And even the Bill Hader character later, who we learn is probably a gay character, he's repressed his whole, for his youth. And if, maybe if there was some tie-in between that act and his repression, maybe we could have done something with that, but the movie didn't do that either. Like, it didn't show that he was repressed. He was repressed because of that kind of action going on in the film. And even Huck agrees with me. You know what I mean? Like,
I think that's Yoshi. That is Yoshi.
But Yoshi's making his podcast debut. Hey, Yoshi.
So Yoshi's a girl. She identifies as female. But she has a non-gender specific name. Yeah, Jim, to your point, I like that you mentioned the red balloon, not the really sad, weird French movie, but like a red balloon in this sense. Because I feel like that was one thing the miniseries got really well. Like kids keep disappearing in Derry, and it's almost like the adults like aren't paying attention. They don't care. You wonder why. And then you see like red balloons floating around. You see like Pennywise's influence like everywhere in the town. He's like this omnipresent force casting a spell over the town. In the movie, I really didn't feel like we got as much of that to explain it. It was called out in the chat earlier. Sorry, the chat moves kind of quick. There's the scene where, a little girl goes to find Pennywise like under the bleachers at a game. And is that like the only time we see Pennywise like coaxing a kid like in present day or whatever?
Well, no, he did it in the funhouse, right?
In the funhouse too.
Well,
yeah.
Oh yeah.
But it was,
okay, you're right. But
yeah,
that was to fuck with Bill. That wasn't just like Pennywise doing his own thing. So Jim, I guess I'm agreeing with you. I think they could have taken that a step further to make that more clear.
Yeah, and I read that oh well, this is based on Stephen King wrote it into the novel
Mhm.
because it's based on a real gay bashing that happened nearby where he lives, and he felt so terrible about it that he wanted to show, how terrible it was by writing it into this horror novel. The problem is that that's not what this. I didn't get the sense in this movie that this movie was that interested in how much the effect of what Pennywise was up to was like manifested from evil things in the town. We didn't see a lot of that. I mean, we had what's Beverly's father. We had seen that, and then this gay bashing thing. But other than that, I wasn't sure like what where I didn't get a sense that Derry was like this cursed, at least in this movie, like was this cursed location.
There's even a part in the novel where they specifically talk about like the cycle. Like, I mean, of course, the book is going to go into more detail because you have like in this case, like I don't know, like
800 pages.
800 pages. It's crazy. But they go into like how there's this 27-year cycle for Pennywise, and the beginning of it is there's an increased like level of like hostility and tension in the town, and then some kids start going missing, and the adults are all kind of ignoring everything. Like that's built into the thing. And we see that some hostility happened, but it's never really connected. As far as the movie is concerned, there is just a gay bashing that just happened to happen, and then Pennywise just is like, "Oh shit, let me finish this dude off." Like, and that completely undermines the thing. And of course, there's this. The other thing to keep in mind is that storytelling techniques that were appropriate in the 80s are not necessarily appropriate in 2019 as well. Because at this point, there's a trope in narrative storytelling called barrier gaze, which means that for gay characters to appear in a lot of films, books, plays, etc., they often have to experience some sort of tragedy, one or both dying, someone getting like the shit beaten out of them, some like all sorts of these terrible things that happen. And of course these things actually happen, and they're a part of our like they're the scars that we as a community wear, and we have to be able to represent those through film. But it has to ring true. This rings incredibly hollow because we follow into the talking about the Bill Hader character. We have a character who is repressing his homosexuality. We get sort of hints about it. It's used as a cudgel against him by Pennywise, who taunts him about this shameful secret. And as far as the movie is concerned, he never truly comes to grips with it. We get to see him finish like carving the E because like he's, I guess he's experienced this crush with Eddie. But once again, we have a barrier gaze trope. Not because Eddie himself was gay. I don't think that he was. This is probably a one-sided crush relationship thing that was going on. But there's no closure. There's no happy ending. There's no acknowledgement of self. There's no growth. There's nothing aside from just the fact that, like Bill Hader, like his character, like we as the audience get like the reveal of him being gay, but the Richie character's connection with that never really comes off on screen.
But does it have to? Let me just throw this out there. Like, I actually found it more interesting that he didn't come out than if he had just, at the end when they're all hugging, he's like, well, hey guys, now that we went through this whole tragedy, I love you enough to tell you I'm gay. Like, this felt more real to me. Like, yeah, he bonded with these people, and yeah, he went through this thing, but like, I don't know. I guess it didn't bother me as much that he didn't fully get there. I got the thought that he was still trying to figure things out himself. Like, when he's doing his stand-up on stage, like, he's talking about his girlfriend. Like, I don't know if he really had a girlfriend or if he made that up for the comedy bit. But, like, maybe he's not there yet. Maybe this helped him to come to grips with a little bit. Maybe if we had It Chapter 3 drag race Pennywise or something, he would fully come out. You know what I'm saying? But, like, as character arcs go, does he have to completely, like, finish that journey?
Well, not in a vacuum, but he does.
Pennywise finished it for us, right? I mean, Pennywise finished it for us, and that's in that I know your dirty little secret.
For the audience, yes, but I'm saying, does the loop have to be closed with his friends? You know what I mean?
It doesn't necessarily have to be closed with his friends. I don't know that it even necessarily has to be closed with himself in a vacuum. But when we also have a film where the opening scene is a kind of a wet fart of a gay bashing, like our homosexual representation in this film, we get it used. We basically get 2 moments of it. We get to see someone get killed and beaten up for the sake of, well, let's just have that as the backstory of like why the guy was in the canal, which is not good representation. And then we follow that up with a character who, through the course of the film, it's a source of shame and a fear, and it's something that Pennywise can use against him. I think any one of those things by itself would be like I could make a stronger argument in favor of, but I think when those 2 things are sandwiched like back to back with one another, I think that it paints a sort of a clueless picture in terms of the filmmakers and how they were trying to tell LGBTQ stories.
Yeah, a lot of missed opportunities in this movie with those storylines, at least for us and for me. Sam, I know you talked about the ending of this versus the ending of the novel, I think, where we touched on it earlier, where this movie didn't seem so interested in showing how the community of Derry was kind of had this cloud of evil over it, and kind of polluted by this evil, and didn't have the same ending as the book. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mean, in the movie, Derry, I don't think in part 2, Derry wasn't a character at all. You got a better sense in part 1 that it was corrupting Bev's dad, or, you know, any of just the unnerving things that happened. But in the end of part 2, I mean, Derry should be destroyed, but that's not the story they're telling. Instead, everybody just is friends at the end. And I think that's why...
You mean in this movie or in the novel?
In the movie. Yeah, in the novel, not only do most of the characters forget what happened, but Derry is completely destroyed and falls into the earth. So there's... that's a big part of the story that they skipped over. And they said it was a budget concern, but it's obviously not a budget concern. You know, they wanted to tell a story that was a little bit happier than everyone perished.
They wanted the Stand By Me story instead of
I think part of that comes from, and I don't say this as necessarily a knock against the thing I'm going to compare it to, but I think that there is definitely a Stranger Things influence on it, like both parts of it. And I like Stranger Things a lot. I think that what it does is it plays into like it plays into the idea of nostalgia and looking back as sort of a love letter to those things. You know, when you watch Stranger Things, whether it's like deftly done or just like way too flat and obvious, it's a love letter to everything that they love. They're going to like do send-ups of all of those cool 80 things they like. And I think that shapes the way that this set of films wanted to view nostalgia as well, because these are characters who all experienced terrible trauma in Derry, but every single one of them has these personal journeys that they go on to find these tokens, which I think is the most problematic part of the movie for me, in that it takes so fucking long to go through all of those. But every single one of them walks away with these like warm, fuzzy feelings of looking back. And I think that a lot of that is like trying to look at nostalgia as this like positive factor, as opposed to like being able to look back and see things for maybe how they were. And I would have liked to have seen maybe a little bit more of that, like the kids realizing like, yeah, we had some wonderful times. Also, our childhoods really fucking sucked. And it was the fact that we banded together that was great, not the fact that we grew up in this like humshucks little town that we love so much. But that's not the story we got.
Hey guys, where do the Losers Club go to celebrate their victory with a tasty dessert?
Think dad joke here now. Think dad joke.
This is for Hamstracked.
Okay, where do the losers go? I don't know. Where do the losers go to celebrate?
To Dairy Queen.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
Hey, Will, did you catch who the character was at the beginning who was the victim of the gay bashing?
Yes, that was is it Xavier or Xavier?
Xavier.
Yeah,
Xavier.
Xavier Dolan.
Yeah.
Uh,
That was I hated that beginning of the movie, but I was kind of thrilled to see he actually got a part in this movie. When I saw him, I didn't know he was going to be brutally murdered. So when I saw him show up at the Canal Days, I'm like, oh, cool, Xavier Dolan's in this movie. Well, not for long. They're just going to kill him.
This movie definitely gets cameos right. There's 3 excellent cameos in that movie.
Yeah, talk about those, Sam.
Well, for once, Stephen King is tolerable in a movie and is actually, I mean, he was doing a good job. I liked his accent. I liked the jokes. I liked that scene. Xavier Dolan's scene.
He didn't get a chance to do much.
I didn't really like. Yeah. I didn't like much about that. But the magical on the film set when the director is revealed to be Peter Bogdanovich. I gasped. I think I was the only one in the cinema that was gasping, but that was a great.
I chuckled. I didn't gasp. I chuckled when I saw him. But yeah, the cameos were great. There probably could have been more.
And a lot of the performances, I know we mentioned this before, and like I said, I'm kind of more positive on this movie than negative. It's just that the negative stuff, I mean, fits the theme of this show. We're an LGBTQ podcast, and the thing that was bad about this movie was the LGBTQ content. So it's going to take up a lot more real estate. But like, I think some of the good things are, and we mentioned it before, all of the performances. Bill Hader, I wouldn't say that this is a star-making role because I think that we've seen him in stronger material. I mean, I think we're all fans of Skeleton Twins here on the podcast, but I do think that this definitely made a wider audience who only knew him as, oh, is that the Saturday Night Live guy? I think a wider audience is now realizing what we realized a few years ago, and I think that's pretty exciting. I think this is going to open some doors for him.
You make us sound like hipsters. Will, we liked Bill Hader as a serious actor before it was cool.
I mean, here's the thing. Like, I don't want it to come across that way, but I can't count the number of times I told people, like, yeah, dude, you should totally go see the Skeleton Twins. They'd be like, what? Oh, okay, I'll go see it. And then, like, they didn't. It's like, you know, you guys slept on this great movie. So, but Jessica Chastain, you mentioned, was really, really good in this as well. I'm also with you in that James McAvoy felt kind of wasted here. He had to play, like, the street man. And when you have someone who can do such great character work, seeing him just sort of play, like, the dull leader, the Leonardo, I guess, is sort of boring, and he didn't bring a lot to it. But I did quite like James Ransone. He played Eddie in this. And really, really interesting fun fact that I didn't realize. So I rewatched Tangerine today just because I wanted to rewatch Tangerine because it's an awesome movie. And Jim, Brad, have you guys seen Tangerine?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There is a pimp in that movie. I don't know if you remember him. Like, he gets into an argument. It's the same guy. It's James Ransone, and it's a completely different character. It's so, like, I was watching it, going like, where do I know this dude from? I've seen him in something recently. Oh, holy shit! It's Eddie. It's Nerdy Eddie. Just going like, bitch, look at this tattoo. It was like, holy shit. Great acting from him. So yeah, go rewatch Tangerine. If you've seen it, watch it again to watch that performance.
Yeah. I mean, I liked his performance in here too, and like I said, the cast did a really good job. The two things that I'm gonna call out, one of which I really liked the Paul Bunyan scene. I don't know, maybe not everybody liked it, but it was, you know, not just because it was an LGBT related scene, but it was in broad daylight, right? The thing happened in broad daylight. And it kind of was like the scariest thing in the movie for me. Like, you know, you have this giant Paul Bunyan like statue that you'd see at a roadside attraction. It's there, and then he turns around and it's missing. And then the next thing you know, it's like chasing him around the churchyard or the schoolyard or whatever. And the people in the background are like like tipping back and forth. It was a really weird like scene, and I really liked that touch in the movie.
See, for me, it was a reverse. I laughed at that scene. I thought it was hokey as fuck.
Yeah,
but I'm glad you liked it so much.
Yeah.
Like
I felt
when the people are behind him as it's going on, I felt like that was silly, and like I was watching Rocket Man. Like I was waiting for them to burst
like
into an Elton John song.
Yeah. It was almost like a musical.
I'd watch that.
Yeah.
When the people were swaying in the background, it got really campy, and I felt like a lot of the horror scenes pushed it into camp, and it almost was like they were trying to go for an Evil Dead 2 or a Nightmare on Elm Street level of just goofiness. Because every time there was horror, it was undercut with a joke almost immediately. Mm-hmm. There was something funny.
There's the opening scene in the restaurant, right? Where all the fortune cookies turn into little monsters.
Yeah.
There's heads floating in the aquariums. Like, it's really scary. And then the waitress just walks in and says, I forget.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Need anything?
The worst joke for me, because I think that it's sort of a matter of like, some of the stuff that appeared on screen, like I'm okay with camp horror for this type of film. The CGI was not great in a lot of places, and so I'm definitely going to knock it there. But I'm okay with them sort of like veering towards like, let's kind of have some fun with this like Freddy Krueger 2.0 type Pennywise power, which, God, this would have been a great Nightmare on Elm Street movie. But there's this one joke that I thought was like especially bad and sort of showcased like just sort of how the writers didn't quite get what they were going for. It's I think at the time it's just James McAvoy and Jessica Chastain, and they're in that townhouse, and some sort of scary shit is happening upstairs. And like instead of them going like, "Oh God, what's happening?" or like panic like that, they just like they do a little quip about like, "Oh, we're back in Derry. Oh, this is what happens in Derry." And it's like these are characters who hadn't really remembered all of like the terrors they went through, or they were just starting to remember them. They had just come back to them, and so it was a poor place for a joke. And it wasn't even like the comedic relief characters who could have like nailed that line or nailed that delivery. Like if you ask me if Richie is going to say an inappropriate joke to sort of like offset the terror, sure, that's what his personality is. But it felt really weird when Bill and Bev were like quipping about the terror happening upstairs.
Yeah. There was a lot of weirdness.
I didn't appreciate the "Here's Johnny" while Bev was in the blood bathroom. That took me right out of whatever tension there was in that scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was just so much weird stuff in this. Like, what about that whole like Native American like leather lampshade shit? What the fuck was that? That went nowhere.
They were trying to bring in some of the world building, I think, of the novel, right? Like they were trying to bring in like the ritual of Judd and some of the lore. Like, good on them for trying to expand it a little bit, but it looked like Odo's bucket from Deep Space Nine that he like regenerates in.
It might have been connected to the novel, but it felt like it had no connection at all to the plot of the movie. Like none.
Yeah, and I think that like if we're also talking about like problematic things, introducing like, oh, let's bring in some like magical Native Americans to come up with this magical spell to do this thing is also a little not okay.
Like okay, we'll try it. Oh yeah. Fuck, that didn't work. Oh,
hey,
back to the scary shit.
Let's include the culture of this people, but not really. Let's just make them kind of like a magical like MacGuffin for how like we beat the ghost. It's again things that may have worked well in the source material that don't necessarily play as well. Yeah. Like this many years later, they should have done some rewriting there.
But at least we got a movie all about the power of friendship and how you can overcome any bully, no matter how big or small, through the power of words and love.
And bullying the bully.
Yeah. You make the bullies small.
And gay.
And then you tear their hearts out.
And gay and body shaming.
Oh, God. Good. All right. Well, guys, any other final thoughts on it before we transition into some plugs?
Yeah, actually, Brad, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
Before we started this discussion, we said that you were sitting right on the fence and like a stiff breeze could have blown you one way or the other. And we've now had we've bloviated quite a bit about like the different like strengths and weaknesses of this film. Have you fallen to one side of the fence through the course of this conversation?
I would say yes to rental, no for movie theater. It blew me more toward the like, wait, if you're going to see it when it's streaming or DVD.
This is why you can make your own intermission in the middle.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because you definitely need one for this movie.
You can pause it to go to the bathroom, have sex. I mean, whatever you need or want to do, it's going to set you up for success. So,
and there's this great feature with this film, actually, where if you need to go to the bathroom in the middle of the movie, there's this feature where they've included some scenes that you don't even have to hit pause while you go do so. Yeah. Like, you can just come back and be fine.
The lampshade scene is the one that I would go for.
Well, supposedly they're making a supercut of parts 1 and 2 together.
Really?
They could make multiple movies out of that. Like, they could make multiple supercuts and have totally different tones and plots, probably, because there was so much in the bag. Like, the pieces of at least a couple of decent movies, I think, are in there.
If they could make an hour and a half out of both films, like merged together, I might watch that. I might.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you did do a supercut, you could get rid of a lot of the extra, like, let's remember what it's like when we were kids scenes, because we would have just seen them as kids. So that actually may be the, like, I think a 5-hour version of that instead of 2, I would watch that's going to be a way tighter cut than even sitting through like 2-3 hour individual versions. So yeah.
Or maybe explain why Angel in the Morning played during Eddie's
leper
escape.
The needle drop? Yeah. No idea.
Oh boy. All right. Well,
great song, not a great use.
Well, we're going to go ahead and make the transition to some plugs as we look to wrap this show up. For those who are unfamiliar, plugs is the part of the show where we put things we love maybe on your radar you may not have had a chance to check out yet. And I'll go first. There was a horror movie that might erase some of the bad taste out of your mouth from It Chapter 2 that came out a while back. At least for me, I really liked it. Called Ma, starring Octavia Spencer. And she was a joy in that film. She really hammed it up, chewed it up, however you want to say it. She was fun. Anytime I think about drinking alcohol now, I always have to have someone else drink with me because I don't want to drink alone. Anyway, Ma came out on Blu-ray, DVD, and streaming last week. But if you haven't had a chance to catch up with Ma yet, and you want to see Octavia Spencer, like, kill some really annoying fucking teenagers, then check it out. Might be down your alley.
Saw that one.
Indeed. We reviewed it on the show. But
we did.
But potentially good stuff. Sam, let's move on to you. What have you got for your plug this week?
Well, my plug is only tangentially related to movies, but the disco punk band Chook Chook Chook, which is a reference to The Gods Must Be Crazy. Their new album came out this week, and it's really good.
Chook Chook Chook.
Mm-hmm.
I probably won't have
3 exclamation points is how you spell that.
Nice. Well, there we go.
I remember the movie barely. I'd have to like watch the movie first before I listen to the music. But you recommend doing both at the same time.
Is the music keyed into the movie, Sam, or is it just the title?
Just the title.
Oh, okay.
And they have a great name. I mean, I made an ass of myself going to one of their shows once because I didn't know who they were, but they were playing at another show I was going to. And I was just like, yeah, I really like this ! Band. They're really good. And someone's like, oh, no. It's It's like, what? No, it's 3 exclamation marks. It's a different band. No. It's.
I didn't realize they had sound.
I was like, oh, okay. Well, I was out of the loop on that one.
Oh, boy.
But yeah, good pick.
Nice. All right. Jim, what have you got this week?
I watched a documentary. You guys know I like documentaries, and this was a pretty good one on Netflix. This one's available to go watch right now. It's called American Factory. Um, I'll just read the quick summary here. Hopes soar when a Chinese company reopens a shuttered factory in Ohio. But a culture clash threatens to shatter an American dream. So you have this factory, it closed down, and this Chinese company bought it and started up the business again, making automotive glass with American workers, and they brought in some Chinese workers to act as management and kind of like mentors for how to bring in kind of the Chinese way of running a manufacturing factory in an old American factory with American workers. And this ended up being a really great documentary about the cultural differences between the Chinese and the Americans who were trying to jointly make this factory work. Could they make it work together? And the tensions between management and the workers on the floor of this factory. I thought this was really good. It's called American Factory. And check it out. It's on Netflix.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Jim. And Will, close this out for plugs. What have you got?
Yeah, this is another rental. You can find it on like iTunes, Amazon, wherever you do your, $3.99 for 48 hours streaming right now. But it's a movie from earlier this year, an A24 film called The Last Black Man in San Francisco. It is an absolutely stellar movie. I five-starred the fuck out of that one as soon as I got done watching it. It's about this black man named Jimmy who he wants to try to reclaim this nice Victorian style home in San Francisco that his grandfather built. And over time, gentrification has come in, and a bunch of the neighborhood's changed, the culture has changed. The house is now on a bus tour so they can talk about the old architecture. And meanwhile, he's trying to get access to this house, having not the means or having the resources to live in this house that his own grandfather built. It is remarkably good. It's one of those films where it's the performances are good, the themes are good, the shots are just so beautiful and stunning and breathtaking. It's one of the movies that just I think kind of fell through the cracks for a lot of people because, it didn't play at a ton of theaters. Some of these just sort of come and go in a few art houses. But you can watch it right now, and you absolutely should. The Last Black Man in San Francisco.
All right. Excellent.
That's one's gotten a lot of buzz, Will, and I don't know. I hope to get to it at some point in my ever-growing list of movies.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. If you're keeping a list at home, there's 4 new things you can potentially check out. Why are you making a face, Jim?
One of those things is 3 exclamation points. Just remember.
Oh, boy. Well, it's been a super fun show. As always, love talking movies with you guys. Sam, it's such a pleasure to have you join us on the show this week. I hope you had just as much fun in front of the camera as you have off camera.
Oh, it was an opportunity I would never pass up. Thank you.
Oh, well, our pleasure.
Great to have you.
Welcome back anytime, for sure. We definitely want to thank everybody who joined us in the live chat tonight. Steve Sosa says, I'm out for the night. Good timing, Steve, because so were we, just about. But a big hello and thank you to everyone who was in the live chat. If you were listening through the magic of digital tape delay, we love you just as much. Thank you for tuning in. Real quick, if folks want to talk movies or whatever between now and then, Jim, where can people find you online?
Find me on Twitter at JJP Out West. That's my handle, my initials, and Out West, JJP Out West. You can also find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico. Talk movies with me, or anything, actually.
All right. Sounds good. And Will, where can people find you?
Catch me on Twitter. I'm at Whatever Cove. I'm on Facebook, William Lindis. Just send me a message first so I know who you are. I log everything at letterboxd.com. Search for me by name. And hey, check me out in the gutters of Derry. We all float down here.
I mean, you are wearing red, and you're round, Will, so you could be a red balloon.
You'll float too. You'll
You'll
float
float
too.
too.
You'll
You'll
float
float
too.
too. All right. Oh boy. And you can find me on Twitter at iBradPro or on Facebook. Just look for Brad Harris. Like Will mentioned, please send a message first. I can't really tell anymore if it's a random bot because they're using pictures of hairy gay men now instead of pretty blonde women. So it's just that much harder. So send a message, say hi, let me know you're from the podcast, and would love to chat movies and whatnot with you. We'll see you all next time. Goodbye, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Say goodbye, Sam.
Oh, bye-bye.